works as the Chief Education and External Officer at TES Global and a visiting professor at the London Knowledge Lab of the Institute of Education in London. Previously, he served as a Member of Parliament and a Minister for Employment Welfare Reform, for which he has been recognised as a live peer. Additionally, he is a patron of the Good Things Foundation and a board member of Apps for Good. Jim, it's a pleasure to have you and welcome.
Thank you so much, Hila, and it's a real joy and a pleasure to be able to join you and talk to you a little and kind of reflect a little as a recovering politician. You know, I'm still making law in the UK Parliament as a Lord, sort of slightly weirdly, but it's great to join you in part because I'm so inspired by what Cohen has done in building this movement and engaging all of you, and I'm inspired also by what young people are doing to change the world, and I believe in that innate capacity of young people to change, and that's a lot of what I want to just talk about in these few minutes that I'm going to talk now. Where I thought I might start is my very first ministerial job back in 2005 was as an environment minister, and listening to Celine's wonderful comments and talking about Indigenous people, that job took me into the heart of the Amazon. But the very first visit that I did in my role safeguarding international wildlife was into the Democratic Republic of the Congo and into the jungle there with some work that we were doing around gorilla conservation, where they are under threat principally from bushmeat and people hunting them for food, but also from some surprising ecosystem problems, I guess, which what Celine was talking about reminded me a little of. And one of the things that was really striking for me was that the bush elephants in that part of the Congolese jungle were massively in decline, with people poaching for ivory and so on. And the role of the elephant in the jungle was essentially to build the highways. They rambled through the jungle, knocking everything down and creating the walkways that the rest of the animal kingdom were using. And it was really important for them to be able to get around easily and smoothly. And there were similar ecosystems effects when I went to India and was looking at what we were doing to conserve vultures. And it was very striking there that they had a collapse of the vulture population, where 98% of the vultures in India just died out almost overnight, and no one really understood why. And eventually, after a lot of study, they found that there was a problem caused by farmers, in that they were giving cattle an anti-inflammatory drug called diclofenac, which many of us might use for acute backache as a pain relief. That's worth a bit more than ibuprofen. And they were giving them to cattle as anti-inflammatories. And what that meant was that when those cattle died and were given sky funerals because of the sacred nature of the cattle in India, the vultures were performing their natural role in picking at the meat, cleaning the meat, cleaning the carcasses, cleaning the skin that the leather workers were then using. They were eating meat that essentially for them was poisoned. It was causing them instant renal failure, and they were dying in their droves. And it took some time to be able to work that out. And that takes me to thinking about the food industry. And the biggest single cause of climate change is food production. And we have this strange relationship with food, particularly in the West, where we have too much of it and we eat way too much and our health is impacted. But the planetary health is also massively impacted about the way we produce and the way we eat food. And when I was listening to David Attenborough's wonderful film on Netflix a couple of weeks ago with my family, we made some decisions as a result of that to change the way that we eat, because of what he said about how if the world continues to grow in terms of its human population, we will then in turn just not have enough room if we carry on eating the amount of meat in particular that we all consume, and the amount of dairy that those animals that we've domesticated, they need in order to support that industry. And that in turn takes me to COVID and this terrible time in the end that we're going through, and a sense that began with a food market in China, in Wuhan. Much of the spread of the disease during certainly the fallow times during the summer in my country was in food processing plants. And it pointed to the interconnectedness of all of these things, in the same way that gorillas need elephants and need all sorts of biodiversity, as Celine was talking about, and vultures play their part in sustaining leather workers, in cleaning up the waste of cattle when they're dead. That incidentally also led to an increase in rabies because of dogs feeding on that cattle because the vultures weren't there anymore. The interconnectedness of things is something that I've been really struck by when I'm thinking about how we might do education better in schools, particularly around climate change and the Sustainable Development Goals. Because when I look at all of the Sustainable Development Goals, which I hope I'm sure everyone is learning about in school, they are all connected. And if we start and finish with climate change, then we take care of all of the rest of them, in essence. And I've focused most of my time in the last 10 years on SDG 4, the Sustainable Development Goal around quality education. I'm now turning more of my attention to climate change. But that, for me, just reinforces the need at the intergovernmental meeting that there's going to be next year here in the UK to get the world's leaders to agree on the rights to climate education for every child around the world. And that's something that I hope young people's voice is going to be heard loud and clear by leaders. And so my ask of you is to have a voice collectively, and to demand to be heard. You know, when I was schools minister, one of the things that I'm particularly pleased with when I look back at my time was that I took the time to listen to the UK Youth Parliament when they came to me saying that the quality of sex and relationship education in UK schools was very bad on the whole, that it was the cause of not only unwanted teenage pregnancy, but increases in sexually transmitted infections and in all sorts of social problems that young people were going through. And they, with one voice, said to me, you need to do something about it. And I began a process of consultation that's now resulting in compulsory sexual relationship education in English schools. And it's been a long journey, but I'm delighted that that's happened. And that shows you, in part, that politicians can and will listen to young people. There's something about engaging with young people as a politician that forces you to be, dare I say, a little more honest than with other politicians and sometimes other adults. And we look at what the likes of Malala and Greta Thunberg have been able to achieve. And it's possible to believe that you can have that impact in the run-up to COP26. So I would say to you, come together and have that voice, but influence the adults that you are in your community as well. Influence your teachers. Teaching is the world's largest profession. There are 80 million teachers around the world. If they acted as one, with pupils, and then pupils in turn influencing parents, then we genuinely can change the world, and we can make the world step up and take the actions that David Attenborough talked about in his film that we need to take, both individually, at a community level, and then at a planetary level. And that requires top-down government intervention as well as all of that bottom-up activity. So I wish you well. I strongly encourage you. We can do this. We can be optimistic. You know, dare I say, President Biden will become president. There are causes for optimism. And with you working together, we can achieve so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I was trying to hit the right button. Thank you so much, Lord Jim Knight, for your insights. It was wonderful to have you on board. Let's continue working together on climate change and the projects. Thank you so much.
Thank you.